All right, guys, let's continue on with The Fall by Albert Camus, chapter 5. So if you haven't noticed, if you made it this far, I'm sure you have noticed that he's talking to people, but the author doesn't write the responses from the people. It just shows the reaction and the responses from the main character. So you'll see as soon as we start. So as soon as we start here, the main character, the person who's speaking, you'll see what I mean. I mean, if you came this far, you had caught it already. So here we go, chapter 5. You are wrong, Cher. The boat is going at top speed, but the Zuider Zee is a dead sea, or almost. With its flat shores lost in the fog, there's no saying where it begins or ends. So we are steaming along without any landmark. We can't gauge our speed. We are making progress, and yet nothing is changing. It's not navigation, but dreaming. In the Greek archipelago, I had the contrary feeling. Constantly new islands would appear on the horizon. Their treeless backbone marked the limit of the sky, and the rocky shore contrasted sharply with the sea. No confusion possible. In the sharp light, everything was a landmark. And from one island to another ceaselessly on our little boat, which was nevertheless dawdling, I felt as if we were scudding along, night and day on the crest of the short, cool waves in a race full of spray and laughter. Since then, Greece itself drifts somewhere, within me on the edge of my memory, tirelessly. Hold on, I too am drifting. I am becoming lyrical. Stop me, Cher, I beg you. By the way, do you know Greece? No? So much the better. What should we do there, I ask you? There one has to be pure in heart. Do you know that their male friends walk along the street in pairs holding hands? Yes, the women stay home, and you often see a middle-aged, respectable man sporting mustaches gravely striding along the sidewalks, his fingers locked in those of his friend. And the Orient likewise, at times. All right, but tell me, would you take my hand in the streets of Paris? Oh, I'm joking. We have a sense of decorum. Scum makes us stilted. Before appearing in the Greek islands, we should have to wash at length. There the air is chaste and sensual enjoyment as transparent as the sea. And we... Let's sit down on these steamer chairs. What a fog. I interrupted myself, I believe, on the way to the little ease. Yes, I tell you what I mean. After having struggled, after having used up all my insolent airs, discouraged by the uselessness of my efforts, I made up my mind to lead the society of men. No, I didn't look for a desert island. There are no more. I simply took refuge among women. As you know, they don't really condemn any weakness. They would be more inclined to try to humiliate or disarm our strength. This is why woman is the reward, not of the warrior, but of the criminal. She is his arbor. Or she is his harbor, his haven. It is in a woman's bed that he is generally arrested. Is she not all that remains to us of earthly paradise? In distress I hastened to my natural harbor, but I no longer indulged in pretty speeches. I still gambled a little out of habit, but invention was lacking. I hesitate to admit it for fear of using a few more naughty words. It seems to me that at that time, I felt the need of love. Obscene, isn't it? In any case, I experienced a secret suffering, a sort of privation that made me emptier and allowed me, partly through obligation and partly out of curiosity, to make a few commitments. Inasmuch as I needed to love and be loved, I thought I was in love. In other words, I acted the fool. I often caught myself asking a question which, as a man of experience, I had always previously avoided. I would hear myself asking, "Do you love me?" You know that it is customary to answer in such cases. So he says, myself asking, "Do you love me?" You know that it is customary to answer in such cases. And you, if someone asked, "Do you love me?" and someone to respond, "And you?" And if I answered yes, I found myself committed beyond my real feelings. If I dared to say no, I ran the risk of ceasing to be loved, and I would suffer therefore. The greater the threat to the feeling in which I had hoped to find calm, the more I demanded that feeling of my partner. Hence I was led to ever more explicit promises and came to expect of my heart an ever more sweeping feeling. Thus I developed the deceptive passion for a charming fool of a woman who had so thoroughly read true love stories that she spoke of love with the assurance and conviction of an intellectual announcing a classless society. Such conviction, as you must know, is contagious. I tried myself out at talking likewise of love and eventually convinced myself, at least until she became my mistress and I realized that the true love stories, though they taught how to talk of love, did not teach how to make love. After having loved a parrot, I had to go to bed with the serpent, so I looked elsewhere for the love promised by books, which I had never encountered in life. But I lacked practice. For more than 30 years I had been in love exclusively with myself. What hope was there of losing such a habit? I didn't lose it and remained a trifler in passion. I multiplied the promises. I contracted simultaneous loves as, at an earlier period, I had multiple liaisons. In this way I piled up more misfortunes for others than at the time of my fine indifference. Have I told you that in despair my parrot wanted to let herself die of hunger? Fortunately I arrived in time and submitted to holding her hand until she met, on his return from a journey to Bali, the engineer with graying temples who had already been described to her by her favorite weekly. In any case, you don't find that funny? In any case, far from finding myself transported and absolved in the whirlwind, the saying goes, of passion, I added even more to the weight of my crimes and to my deviation from virtue. As a result, I conceived such a loathing for love that for years I could not hear La Vie en Rose or the Lebstad without gritting my teeth. I tried accordingly to give up women in a certain way and to live in a state of chastity. After all, the friendship ought to satisfy me, but this was tantamount to giving up gambling. Without desire, women bored me beyond all expectation, and obviously I bored them too. No more gambling and no more theater. I was probably in the realm of truth, but truth, cher ami, is a colossal bore. Despairing of love and of chastity, I at last bethought myself of debauchery, a substitute for love which quiets the laughter, restores silence, and above all, confers immortality. At a certain degree of lucid intoxication, lying late at night between two prostitutes and drained of all desire, hope ceases to be a torture, you see. The mind dominates the whole past, and the pain of living is over forever. In a sense, I had always lived in debauchery, never having ceased wanting to be immortal. Wasn't this the key to my nature and also a result of the great self-love I have told you about? Yes, I was bursting with a longing to be immortal. I was too much in love with myself not to want the precious object of my love never to disappear. Since in the waking state and with a little self-knowledge, one can see no reason why immortality should be conferred on a salacious monkey, one has to obtain substitutes for that immortality. Because I longed for eternal life, I went to bed with harlots and drank for nights on end. In the morning, to be sure, my mouth was filled with the bitter taste of the mortal state. But for hours on end, I had soared in bliss. Dare I admit it to you? I still remember with affection certain nights when I used to go to a sordid nightclub to meet a quick-changed dancer who honored me with her favors and for whose reputation I even fought one evening with a bearded braggart. Every night I would strut at the bar in the red light and dust of that earthly paradise, lying fantastically and drinking at length. I would wait for dawn and at last end up in the always unmade bed of my princess, who would indulge mechanically in sex and then sleep without transition. Day would come softly to throw light on this disaster, and I would get up and stand motionless in a dawn of glory. Alcohol and women provided me, I admit, the only solace of which I was worthy. I'll reveal this secret to you, cher ami. Don't fear to make use of it. Then you'll see that true debauchery is liberating because it creates no obligation. In it you possess only yourself, hence it remains the favorite pastime of the great lovers of their own person. It is a jungle without past or future, without any promise above all, nor any immediate penalty. The places where it is practiced are separated from the world. On entering, one leaves behind fear and hope. Conversation is not obligatory there. What one comes for can be had without words and often indeed without money. Oh, I beg you, let me pay honor to the unknown and forgotten women who helped me then. Even today, my recollection of them contains something resembling respect. In any case, I freely took advantage of that liberation. I was even seen in a hotel dedicated to what is called sin, living simultaneously with a mature prostitute and an unmarried girl of the best society. I played the gallant with the first and gave the second an opportunity to learn the realities. I played the gallant with the first and gave the second an opportunity to learn the realities. He's saying with the prostitute, he played like what they were doing was moral, and with the other one, the opportunity to learn the realities. Unfortunately, the prostitute had a most middle-class nature. She since consented to write her memoirs for a confessions magazine quite open to modern ideas. The girl, for her part, got married to satisfy her unbridled instincts and made use of her remarkable gifts. I am not a little proud likewise to have been admitted as an equal at that time by a masculine guild too often reviled, but I'll not insist on that. You know that even very intelligent people glory in being able to empty one bottle more than the next man. I might ultimately have found peace and release in that happy dissipation, but there too I encountered an obstacle in myself. This time it was my liver, and a fatigue so dreadful that it hasn't yet left me. One plays at being immortal, and after a few weeks one doesn't even know whether or not one can hang on till the next day. The sole benefit of that experience, when I had given up my nocturnal exploits, was that life became less painful for me. The sole benefit of that experience when I had given up my nocturnal exploits was that life became less painful for me. The fatigue that was gnawing at my body had simultaneously cauterized many raw spots in me. Each excess decreases vitality, hence suffering. There was nothing frenzied about debauchery, contrary to what is thought. It is but a long sleep. You must have noticed that men who really suffer from jealousy have no more urgent desire than to go to bed with the woman they nevertheless think has betrayed them. Of course, they want to assure themselves once more that their dear treasure still belongs to them. They want to possess it, as the saying goes. But there was also the fact that immediately afterward they are less jealous. Physical jealousy is a result of the imagination at the same time that it is a self-judgment. One attributes to the rival the nasty thoughts one had oneself in the same circumstances. One attributes to the rival the nasty thoughts oneself had oneself. One attributes to the rival the nasty thoughts one had oneself in the same circumstances. Fortunately, excess of the sensual satisfaction weakens both imagination and judgment. The suffering then lies dormant as long as virility does. For the same reasons, adolescence loses their metaphysical unrest with their first mistress, and certain marriages, which are merely formalized debauches, become the monotonous hearses of daring and invention. Yes, cher ami, bourgeois marriage has put our country into slippers and will soon lead it to the gates of death. I am exaggerating? No, but I am straying from the subject. I merely wanted to tell you the advantage I derived from those months of orgy. I lived in a sort of fog in which the laughter became so muffled that eventually I ceased to notice it. The indifference that already had such a hold over me now encountered no resistance and extended its sclerosis. No more emotions, and even temper, or rather no temper at all. Tubercular lungs are cured by drying up and gradually asphyxiate their happy owner. So it was with me as I peacefully died of my cure. I was still living on my work, although my reputation was seriously damaged by my flights of language and the regular exercise of my profession compromised by the disorder of my life. It is noteworthy, however, that I aroused less resentment by my nocturnal excesses than by my verbal provocations. The reference purely verbal that I often made to God in my speeches before the court awakened mistrust in my clients. They probably feared that heaven could not represent their interests as well as a lawyer invincible when it came to the code of law. Whence it was but a step to conclude that I invoked the divinity in proportion to my ignorance. My clients took that step and became scarce. Now and then I still argued a case, at times even forgetting that I no longer believed in what I was saying. I was a good advocate. My own voice would lead me on, and I would follow it without really soaring as I once did. I at least got off the ground and did a little hedge hopping. Outside of my profession, I saw but few people and painfully kept alive one or two tired liaisons. It even happened that I would spend purely friendly evenings without any element of desire, yet with the difference that, resigned to boredom, I scarcely listened to what was being said. I became a little fatter, and at last was able to believe that the crisis was over. Nothing remained but to grow older. One day, however, during a trip to which I was treating a friend without telling her I was doing so to celebrate my cure, I was aboard an ocean liner, on the upper deck, of course. Suddenly, far off at sea, I perceived a black speck on the steel gray ocean. I turned away at once, and my heart began to beat wildly. When I forced myself to look, the black speck had disappeared. I was on the point of shouting, of stupidly calling for help when I saw it again. It was one of those bits of refuse that ships leave behind. Yet I had not been able to endure watching it, for I had thought at once of a drowning person. Then I realized calmly, as you resign yourself to an idea, the truth of which you have long known, that cry which had sounded over the Seine behind me years before had never ceased, carrying by the river to the waters of the Channel to travel throughout the world, across the limitless expanse of the ocean, and that it had waited for me there until the day I had encountered it. I realized likewise that it would continue to await me on seas and rivers everywhere, in short, where lies the bitter water of my baptism. Throughout the world, across the limitless pleasure. It's crazy. I don't know if you guys know this, but this author that I'm reading, Albert Camus, died in a car accident. And it said when whoever first got on the scene, that he was screaming. It talks about a loud cry in this book. A cry that I don't know, it's kind of like a small little seed in this book that's lingering, that we're trying to figure out what it is. I realized likewise that it would continue to await me on seas and rivers everywhere, in short, where lies the bitter water of my baptism. Here too, by the way, aren't we on the water? On this flat, monotonous, interminable water whose limits are indistinguishable from those of the land? Is it credible that we shall ever reach Amsterdam? We shall never get out of this immense holy water font. Listen, don't you hear the cries of invisible gulls? If they are crying in our direction, to what are they calling us? But they are the same gulls that were crying, that were already calling over the Atlantic the day I realized definitively that I was not cured, that I was still cornered, and that I had to make shift with it. Ended the glorious life, but ended also the frenzy and the convolutions, or the convulsions. I had to submit and admit my guilt. I had to live in the Little Ease. To be sure, you are not familiar with that dungeon cell that was called the Little Ease in the Middle Ages. In general, one was forgotten there for life. That cell was distinguished from others by ingenious dimensions. It was not high enough to stand up in, or nor yet wide enough to lie down in. One had to take on an awkward manner and live on the diagonal. Sleep was a collapse and waking a squatting. Mon cher, there was genius. And I am weighing my words in that so simple invention. Every day through the unchanging restriction that stiffened his body, the condemned man learned that he was guilty, and that innocence consists in stretching joyously. Can you imagine in that cell a frequenter of summits and upper decks? What? One could live in those cells and still be innocent? Improbable, highly improbable, or else my reasoning would collapse. That innocence should be reduced to living hunchbacked. I refuse to entertain for a second such a hypothesis. Moreover, we cannot assert the innocence of anyone, whereas we can state with certainty the guilt of all. Every man testifies to the crime of all the others. That is my faith and my hope. Believe me, religions are on the wrong track the moment they moralize and fulminate commandments. God is not needed to create guilt or to punish. Our fellow men suffice, aided by ourselves. You were speaking of the last judgment. Allow me to laugh respectfully. I shall wait for it resolutely, for I have known what is worse, the judgment of men. For them, no extenuating circumstances, even the good intention, is ascribed to crime. Have you at least heard of the spitting cell, which a nation recently thought up to prove itself the greatest on earth? A walled-up box in which the prisoner can stand without moving. The solid door that locks him in his cement shell stops at chin level. Hence only his face is visible, and every passing jailer spits copiously on it. The prisoner wedged into his cell cannot wipe his face, though he is allowed, it is true, to close his eyes. Well, that, mon cher, is a human invention. They didn't need God for that little masterpiece. What of it? Well, God's sole usefulness would be to guarantee innocence, and I am inclined to see religion rather as a huge laundering venture, as it was once but briefly for exactly 3 years, and it wasn't called religion. Since then, soap has been lacking, our faces are dirty, and we wipe one another's noses. All dunces, all punished. Let's all spit on one another and hurry to the Little Ease. To the Little Ease. Each tries to spit first, that's all. I'll tell you a big secret, mon cher. Don't wait for the last judgment. It takes place every day. No, it's nothing. I'm merely shivering a little in this damn humidity. We're landing anyway. Here we are after you, but stay a little, I beg you, and walk home with me. I haven't finished. I must go on. Continuing is what is hard. Say, do you know why he was crucified? The one you are perhaps thinking of at this moment? Well, there were heaps of reasons for that. There are always reasons for murdering a man. On the contrary, it is impossible to justify his living. That's why crime always finds lawyers and innocence only rarely. But beside the reasons that have been very well explained to us for the past 2,000 years, there was a major one for that terrible agony, and I don't know why it has been so carefully hidden. The real reason is that he knew he was not altogether innocent. If he did not bear the weight of the crime he was accused of, he had committed others even though he didn't know which ones. Did he really not know them? He was at the source after all. He must have heard of a certain slaughter of the innocents, the children of Judea massacred while his parents were taking him to a safe place. Why did they die if not because of him? Those blood-spattered soldiers, those infants cut in two, filled him with horror. But given the man he was, I am sure he could not forget them. And as for that sadness that can be felt in his every act, wasn't it the incurable melancholy of a man who heard night after night the voice of Rachel weeping for her children and refusing all comfort? The lamentation would rend the night. Rachel would call her children who had been killed for him, and he was still alive. The lamentation would rend the night. Rachel would call her children who had been killed for him, and he was still alive. Knowing what he knew, familiar with everything about man, Who would have believed that crime consists less in making others die than in not dying oneself? Brought face to face day and night with his innocent crime, he found it too hard for him to hold on and continue. It was better to have done with it, not to defend himself, to die in order not to be the only one to live, and to go elsewhere where perhaps he would be upheld. He was not upheld, he complained, and as a last straw he was censored. Yes, it was the third evangelist, I believe, who first suppressed his complaint. Why hast thou forsaken me? It was a seditious cry, wasn't it? Well then, the scissors. Mind you, if Luke had suppressed nothing, the matter would hardly have been noticed in any case, and would not have assumed such importance. Thus the censor shouts aloud what he prescribes. The world's order likewise is ambiguous. Nonetheless, the censored one was unable to carry on, and I know, Cher, whereof I speak. There was a time when I didn't at any minute have the slightest idea how I could reach the next one. Yes, one can wage war in this world, ape love, torture one's fellow man, or merely say evil of one's neighbor while knitting. But in certain cases, carrying on, merely continuing, is superhuman. And he was not superhuman. You can take my word for it. He cried aloud his agony, and that's why I love him, my friend who died without knowing. The unfortunate thing is that he left us alone to carry on whatever happens, even when we are lodged in the little ease, knowing in turn what he knew, but incapable of doing what he did and of dying like him. People naturally try to get some help from his death. After all, it was a stroke of genius to tell us. You're not a very pretty sight, that's certain. Well, we won't go into the details. We'll just liquidate it all at once on the cross. But too many people now climb onto the cross merely to be seen from a greater distance, even if they have to trample somewhat on the one who has been there so long. Too many people have decided to do without generosity in order to practice charity. Too many people have decided to do without generosity in order to practice charity. Oh, the injustice, the rank injustice that has been done him. It wrings my heart. Talking about Jesus. Good heavens, the habit has seized me again, and I'm on the point of making a speech to the court. Forgive me and realize that I have my reasons. Why, a few streets from here, there was a museum called Our Lord in the attic. At the time, they had the catacombs in the attic. After all, the cellars are flooded here, but today, set your mind at rest. Their Lord is neither in the attic nor in the cellar. They have hoisted him onto a judge's bench in the secret of their hearts. And they smite, they judge above all, they judge in his name. He spoke softly to the adulteress, neither do I condemn thee. But that doesn't matter, they condemn without absolving anyone. In the name of the Lord, here is what you deserve, Lord. He, my friend, didn't expect so much. He simply wanted to be loved, nothing more. Of course, there are those who love him, even among Christians, but they are not numerous. He had foreseen that too. He had a sense of humor. Peter, you know, the coward, Peter denied him. I know not the man. I know not what thou sayest, etc. Really, he went too far, and my friend makes a play on words. Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. Irony could go no further, don't you think? But no, they still triumph. You see, he had said it. He had said it indeed. He knew the question thoroughly. And then he left forever, leaving them to judge and condemn, with pardon on their lips and the sentence in their hearts. For it cannot be said there was no more pity. No, good Lord, we never stop talking of it. Simply no one is ever acquitted anymore. On dead innocents the judges swarm, the judges of all species, those of Christ and those of the Antichrist, who are the same anyway, reconciled in the little ease. For one mustn't blame everything exclusively on the Christians. The others are involved too. Do you know what has become of one of the houses in this city that sheltered Descartes? A lunatic asylum. Yes, general delirium and persecution. We too naturally are obliged to come to it. You have had a chance to observe that I spare nothing. And as for you, I know that you agree in thought. Wherefore, since we are all judges, we are all guilty before one another, all Christ in our mean manner, one by one crucified, always without knowing. We should at least, if I, Clemens, had not found a way. We should be at least, if I, Clemens, had not found a way, the only solution, truth at last. No, I am stopping, cher ami, fear nothing. Besides, I'm going to leave you, for we are at my door. In solitude and when fatigued, one is after all inclined to take oneself for a prophet. When all is said and done, that's really what I am, having taken refuge in a desert of stones, fogs, and stagnant waters, an empty prophet for shabby times, Elijah without a Messiah, choked with fever and alcohol, my back up against this moldy door, my finger raised toward a threatening sky, showering imprecations on lawless men who cannot endure any judgment, for they can't endure it, tres cher. And that's the whole question. He who clings to a law does not fear the judgment that reinstates him in an order he believes in. But the keenness of human torments is to be judged without a law. Yet we are in that torment, deprived of their natural curve. The judges, loosed at random, are racing through their job. Hence we have to try to go faster than they, don't we? And it's a real madhouse. Prophets prophets and quacks multiply. They hasten to get there with a good law or a flawless organization before the world is deserted. Fortunately, I arrived. I am the end and the beginning. I announce the law. In short, I am a judge penitent. Yes, yes, I'll tell you tomorrow what this noble profession consists of. You are leaving the day after tomorrow, so we are in a hurry. Come to my place, will you? Just ring 3 times. You are going back to Paris? Paris is far. Paris is beautiful. I haven't forgotten it. I remember its twilights at about this same season. Evening falls, dry and rustling. Over the roofs, blue with smoke. The city rumbles. The river seems to flow backward. Then I used to wander in the streets. They wander now too, I know. They wander, pretending to hasten toward the tired wife, the forbidding home. Ah, mon ami, do you know what the solitary creature is like as he wanders in big cities?